My parents made me drop out of college to pay for my sister's Citi medical school. My mother said, she comes first, quit, and support her. My sister laughed, someone like you doesn't belong in college anyway. I signed the withdrawal papers in tears. Months later, my grandfather called. I've been depositing your tuition every year. Why haven't you used it? The Ohio winter was unforgiving. As the sound of snow pelted against the window, Melissa Watson absent-mindedly stared at her college textbook. She loved studying. A bookworm since childhood, she had realized her dream of studying psychology at the state university. Melissa, dinner's ready. Her mother Elizabeth's voice called from downstairs. Melissa sighed, placed a bookmark in her psychology textbook, and trudged down the stairs with heavy steps. In the dining room, her father Edward was already reading the newspaper while her mother Elizabeth arranged the food. Family dinner time. For Melissa, however, it was becoming increasingly painful day by day. Where's Catherine? Melissa asked, and her mother answered with a smile. Oh, she'll be back soon. She's out shopping with friends. Melissa's sister Catherine was the most prominent presence in the family, referred to as the family treasure. She claimed to be preparing for medical school, but in reality, she spent more time hanging out with friends. Did you have classes today? Father Edward asked, though his eyes never left the newspaper. He worked at a local insurance company, providing a modest but stable income for the family. Yes, there was a special lecture on developmental psychology today. Professor Morrison, Dad, listen to this. The front door swung open forcefully, and Catherine's jubilant voice echoed throughout the house. She rushed in carrying shopping bags in both hands, looking delighted. Melissa's words were cut short by her sister's arrival and disappeared into thin air. Look what I bought today. It was on sale, unbelievably cheap. Do you know some people earn over a month just by posting Reddit stories on YouTube? No face, no voice, just a laptop. I'd do it too, link below if you're curious. Catherine pulled a designer handbag out of her shopping bag to show her parents. It was clearly an expensive item, despite being described as unbelievably cheap. That's lovely, Catherine, her mother said, her eyes crinkling with approval. It suits you perfectly. Father finally looked up from his newspaper and smiled. If our little gem is happy, then I'm happy too. Melissa silently began to eat. The item probably cost at least twice her weekly wages from the cafe. She planned to enter a master's program in clinical psychology after graduation and was working at a cafe on weekends to earn living expenses while focusing on her studies. She received little support from her parents and had to cover most of her tuition on her own. By the way, Melissa, her mother turned to her. When does your college program end? In another year, Melissa replied. Then I plan to enter a master's program. My goodness, her mother frowned. You're still going to continue? Don't you think you're old enough to move out and be independent? Melissa was at a loss for words. She was living at her parents' house to save money for tuition. She couldn't afford an apartment. Melissa doesn't have a boyfriend because she's always studying, Catherine teased. I could never live like that. How are your preparations for medical school going, Catherine? Melissa tried to change the subject. For a moment, a cloud passed over Catherine's face. Well, I'm still preparing. I'm sure I'll get in next year. She had failed the university entrance exam several times since high school graduation, yet her parents continued to support her fully. Catherine had an eye for designer brands, wanted luxury cars, and her parents spared no expense to fulfill her desires. After dinner, Melissa returned to her room and resumed studying. Her phone rang, and checking the screen, she saw a message from her grandfather Joseph. How are you doing, Melissa? Let me know how you're getting along. Melissa smiled. Joseph was the kindest member of her family. Her grandmother Martha had passed away 5 years ago, and her grandfather lived far away in Florida. Her grandparents had once run a successful real estate business and had ample savings for their retirement. Melissa sent her grandfather a brief reply, promising to call him soon. Family conversations always revolved around Catherine, with Melissa's achievements and efforts rarely acknowledged. Still, she didn't give up on her path and continued her studies. She hadn't abandoned her dream of becoming a clinical psychologist who could heal people's emotional wounds. The next morning, Melissa woke up early and headed to the university. The campus library was her favorite place. In that quiet, peaceful space, she could immerse herself in psychology papers. After her afternoon classes ended, and she had done additional research in the library, Melissa was preparing to return home. Melissa. Turning around, she saw Professor Morrison waving to her. Professor Morrison was the most respected professor in the psychology department, and one of the few people who highly valued Melissa's talent. I read your latest report. Brilliant insight. I'd like to discuss potential research topics for your master's program more, if you have time. Yes, of course. Melissa's face lit up with a smile. An hour later, Melissa headed home with excitement about a new research idea. Professor Morrison had invited her to participate in a joint research project on trauma recovery. It could be a significant step toward her dream. When she arrived home, an unfamiliar luxury car was parked in front of the entrance. When she entered the living room, her parents and Catherine were sitting with serious expressions. Several documents were spread out on the table. Melissa, we need to talk. Sit down. Her mother Elizabeth's voice sounded colder than usual. Melissa sat on the sofa, feeling anxious. Did something happen? Her father Edward cleared his throat, paused as if choosing his words, and then began. It's about Catherine. She has good news. Catherine appeared a bit nervous but puffed out her chest proudly. I got accepted to medical school. That's wonderful. Melissa genuinely congratulated her. Though her relationship with her sister was complicated, she didn't begrudge her success. But there's a problem, her mother continued. The tuition, it's going to cost more than we expected. Her father picked up the documents and showed them to Melissa. They detailed the medical school tuition and living expenses. Indeed, the amount was enormously high. We've been saving for Catherine's medical school, her father said gravely. But tuition costs have risen more than expected, and we won't have enough at this rate. Melissa tried to understand the situation. If there's anything I can do to help there, is her mother interrupted. I'm sorry, but we want you to quit college and get a job. For a moment, Melissa couldn't believe her ears. What? Your sister's future is more important, her father said firmly. If she becomes a doctor, it will help the whole family. Your psychology studies are, well, more like a hobby, aren't they? A hobby? Melissa's voice trembled. I'm planning to become a clinical psychologist, to heal and support people with emotional wounds. And how much can you earn doing that? Catherine snickered. If I become a doctor, I can cure diseases. Aren't emotional issues just secondary? Catherine. Melissa raised her voice. Tears welled up in her eyes. Don't belittle my dream. Be realistic, Melissa, her mother said harshly. As a family, we should prioritize Catherine's medical school. You can always go back to school later. Later? I'm just 1 year away from graduating. If I quit now, what's the point of a failure like you going to college anyway? Catherine's words cut deep into Melissa's heart. I have more potential. Everyone knows that. Her father raised his hand to stop Catherine, but his eyes showed no intention of defending his older daughter. Melissa, this was decided in our family meeting. Go to the university tomorrow and complete the withdrawal procedures. And Martin's Grocery in Ohio City is hiring, her mother said calmly. I've already spoken with them, so you should be able to start working the day after tomorrow. Melissa was speechless. All her efforts and dreams were about to crumble. She ran to her room and closed the door. Burying her face in her pillow, she cried silently. The next morning, Melissa headed to the university with heavy steps. Though she wanted to resist inwardly, she didn't have the strength to defy her family's decision. As she submitted her withdrawal form at the administration office, she cried again. What happened, Ms. Watson? Janet, the office clerk, asked with concern. You're one of our top students. It's family circumstances, Melissa choked on her words. As she left the university, she coincidentally met Professor Morrison. The professor immediately sensed something was wrong when he saw her red eyes and exhausted expression. You've withdrawn? The professor asked with an incredulous expression. Melissa nodded silently. May I ask why? She explained the situation. Anger flashed across the professor's face. That's unjust. You have remarkable talent. To give up like this, I have no choice. Melissa's shoulders slumped. Professor Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder and handed her a business card. If anything happens, please contact me anytime. Losing a student like you is truly regrettable. Melissa accepted the card with gratitude. It felt like a thin thread connecting her to her dream. From that day on, Melissa's life transformed completely. Every night when she returned home exhausted, she was greeted by Catherine's stories of success in medical school or boasts about new purchases. "Give me some money for this month too." One evening, Catherine entered Melissa's room and said, "I just gave you some last week," Melissa replied in a tired voice. "It's not enough. I need new textbooks, and I want to go on a weekend trip with friends too." Melissa silently took out several bills from her wallet. Most of her salary was handed over to her family and used for Catherine's medical school tuition and living expenses. She had almost no savings for herself. Several months passed, and Melissa felt her dreams slipping further away. Her former peers were graduating and starting their own paths. She had lost the opportunity to join Professor Morrison's joint research project. One day, Melissa learned that her parents had purchased a new luxury car for Catherine. She couldn't help but wonder. The amount was far more than her salary could cover. The March rain washed away the last remnants of the Ohio winter. Still wearing her cashier uniform, Melissa exited the supermarket carrying grocery bags. Having just finished her shift, her legs felt as heavy as lead. On her way home, she stopped at a coffee shop to shelter from the rain. It was a place with a view of the university campus where she had once studied. Looking out the window, Melissa was reminded of how much her life had changed. Just a few months ago, she had been eagerly reading textbooks and preparing for exams in this very shop. Now she stood at a supermarket checkout all day and handed most of her salary over to her sister. "One black coffee, please." She ordered at the counter and sat at a small table. Glancing at her cell phone, she noticed a missed call from an unfamiliar number. Though she was tired and tempted to ignore it, she thought it might be important and answered the call. "Melissa, finally got through to you." The voice on the other end was a familiar, cherished one. "Grandpa?" Melissa exclaimed. "Grandpa Joseph?" "Yes, it's me, granddaughter." Her grandfather Joseph's voice was warm. "It's been a while. I'm calling for my new Florida number. My old phone broke." "Grandpa?" Melissa teared up with joy. "How have you been? It's been so long since I've heard from you. I'm more worried about you." Her grandfather's voice turned serious. "How's university? You should be in your final year now, right?" Melissa was startled. She hadn't told her grandfather about dropping out. Suddenly, her throat went dry. "Actually, well," she stumbled over her words. "What happened?" Her grandfather's voice was gentle but had a sharpness to it. Melissa took a deep breath and began to explain what had happened over the past few months. She revealed how her parents had forced her to withdraw, how she was working to support Catherine's medical school, and how her salary was being used. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Grandpa? I'm listening." Her grandfather's voice had a restrained anger seeping through it. "Melissa, I've been transferring money to your account every year for your tuition. It was money your grandmother and I had saved for your future. Why didn't you use it?" Melissa was confused. "Account? I don't know anything about such an account. It's an educational trust account that was set up when you turned," her grandfather explained. "I've been sending, each year for your college and graduate school tuition. Your parents must know about it." "No, they definitely know about it." Melissa clutched her coffee cup tightly. In her mind, puzzle pieces were rapidly falling into place. The reason her parents could afford expensive items for Catherine, the new car, trips? It was money her grandfather had sent for Melissa's education. "My parents, with my money." Melissa was at a loss for words. Tears fell from her eyes. "Come to my house immediately," her grandfather said resolutely. "I'll arrange a flight ticket." "Can you come first thing tomorrow morning?" Melissa hesitated. She had her job at the supermarket. And leaving home, without telling her parents. "But, my job." "Don't worry about that," her grandfather said with determination. "There are more important matters. Your future. What do you really want to do, Melissa?" She looked out at the rain. The university campus was faintly visible through it. Her conversation with Professor Morrison, the joint research project. Her dream of becoming a clinical psychologist. Everything came back to her heart. "I'll come, Grandpa." Melissa made her decision. "First thing tomorrow morning." "Good decision." Relief tinged her grandfather's voice. "I'll email you the ticket details. Don't bring anything. We'll get what you need here." After hanging up, Melissa sat in the coffee shop for a while. Her heart was a mixture of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. Perhaps it was time to reclaim her life. The next morning, Melissa woke before dawn. Her parents and Catherine were still asleep. She packed only the bare essentials in a small bag, taking Professor Morrison's business card and the psychology textbook that was now a precious memento. Before quietly leaving the house, she left a short note on the kitchen table. "I'll be away for a few days. Contact me on my cell, Melissa." A taxi took her to the airport. As she boarded the early morning flight to Florida, Melissa didn't look back. When the plane took off and the town of Ohio disappeared from her view, she felt for the first time the sensation of reclaiming her life. Looking out the window, Melissa reflected on the events of the past few months. She loved her family, but now, anger and feelings of betrayal swirled in her heart. Not only had her dream been taken away, but money that had been set aside for her had been used without her knowledge. Her cell phone rang. It was her mother. Melissa didn't answer. Soon, there were calls from her father and messages from Catherine as well. She ignored them all. When she arrived at the Florida airport, her grandfather Joseph was waiting for her. His back was bent, his hair completely white, but his eyes still had the same sharpness as before. Melissa. Her grandfather rushed to her as soon as he spotted her, and embraced her tightly. "I'm glad you came, Grandpa," Melissa cried on his chest. They were tears of suffering, but also of relief. Her grandfather's house was a small but comfortable single-story home near the coast. He had sold the larger house where he had once lived with her grandmother and moved to a residence suited for his retirement life. A photograph of grandmother Martha adorned the living room. "Rest first." Her grandfather took her bag and showed her to the guest room. "Then we'll talk about everything." Melissa was tired, but her head was filled with countless questions. "Grandpa, about that account, tell me more." Her grandfather heaved a deep sigh. "I'll tell you everything. But first, you should eat something and rest a bit." It was a long journey. Melissa nodded obediently. After taking a shower and having a light meal prepared by her grandfather, she finally regained her composure. "Now let's begin." Her grandfather sat beside her in the living room. "It's time to know the truth." The morning sun of Florida shone through the window, waking Melissa. For a moment she was confused about where she was, but quickly remembered yesterday's events. Her grandfather's house, the sudden departure, and fragments of the events that had been occurring without her knowledge. In the living room, Grandfather Joseph was preparing breakfast. Toast, scrambled eggs, fresh orange juice. The same menu from when Grandmother Martha was alive. "Did you sleep well?" her grandfather gently asked. "Yes, for the first time in a long while," Melissa answered honestly. Since starting work at the supermarket, her sleep had always been insufficient. After breakfast, her grandfather led her to his study. The small room had documents neatly stored, reflecting her grandfather's meticulous personality. He took a thick file from a drawer and placed it on the table. "This is everything," her grandfather said quietly. "The documents related to your educational trust." Melissa opened the file with nervous hands. It contained bank statements spanning several years. The records clearly showed that had been deposited annually for the past 4 years into an account bearing her name. A total of, it was enough to cover her college tuition and provide sufficient funds for her to pursue a master's degree. "I was never told about any of this," Melissa said. Trembling voice. "Before your grandmother passed away, we set aside savings for our grandchildren's education," her grandfather explained sadly. "We sent the same amount to Catherine as well. We sent the same amount to Catherine as well. We notified your parents of the transfer every year. Father and mother, they hid this fact from me." Anger welled up inside Melissa. Her grandfather nodded. "It seems that way. I live far away and only called a few times a year, so I didn't know the details of the situation. I thought you were still attending university." "I was, until recently." Melissa gave a bitter smile. "But I was forced by my parents to drop out. They said they needed the money for Catherine's medical school tuition." Anger colored her grandfather's face. "That's absurd. I had provided enough money for both of your educations." "I guess my money was also being used for Catherine," Melissa said sadly. "The new car, luxury brand items, it was all my money." Her grandfather stood up and reached for the phone. "Let's call a lawyer. This is clearly embezzlement." An hour later, a white-haired lawyer named Andrew Clark visited her grandfather's house. An old friend of her grandfather's, he was a trustworthy legal expert. After listening to the situation, Andrew examined the documents with a serious expression. "This is definitely embezzlement," Andrew said severely. "Unauthorized withdrawals from Melissa's account constitute a criminal act. We can take legal action. Report them to the police?" Melissa was disturbed. Though angry at her parents, she hesitated at the thought of criminally charging them. "Let's talk to them first," Andrew calmly suggested. "Confront them with the facts and demand proper compensation. If they don't comply, then we'll take legal measures." "I'll call them right now," her grandfather said with determination. Melissa sat beside her grandfather as he called her parents. Through the speakerphone, her father Edward's surprised voice could be heard. "Joseph? What's happening?" "Melissa has gone missing." "Edward, Melissa is at my house now." Her grandfather's voice was ice cold. "Can you explain about her educational trust?" Silence continued on the other end of the phone. That? Edward stuttered. I was just borrowing it temporarily. Borrowing? Over. Her grandfather raised his voice. You made Melissa quit university, forced her to work, and all the while you were misappropriating her tuition money? There were circumstances, Joseph, Edward tried to explain. Catherine's medical school. I don't want to hear it, her grandfather interrupted. Have you no remorse for stealing your granddaughter's future? Melissa's mother, Elizabeth, also came on the line, but it was for the good of the whole family. Catherine's medical school was the top priority. Top priority? Her grandfather was trembling with anger. What about Melissa? What about her dreams? You know, Grandpa. Catherine's voice came through the phone. I have value. More than Melissa. Be quiet, Catherine. Her grandfather's voice was stern. Do you realize how selfish you are? Lawyer Andrew leaned forward and said into the phone, Mr. and Mrs. Watson, I am Andrew Clark, Joseph's lawyer. Tomorrow, we will come to Ohio. Let's discuss the legal aspects of the misappropriation from Melissa's educational trust. A lawyer? Edward's voice went up an octave. There's no need to go that far. It's a family matter. This is a crime, Andrew said calmly. Let's meet at your home tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please have all relevant documents ready. After the call ended, Melissa covered her face with trembling hands. Though they had successfully confronted the facts, her relationship with her family might have been irreparably damaged. Are you ready? Her grandfather placed his hand on her shoulder. Tomorrow will be a challenging day. Yes, I'm prepared. Melissa took a deep breath. To reclaim my life. The next day, Melissa, her grandfather, and lawyer Andrew visited her family home in Ohio. The meeting began in the living room, filled with tension. Her parents sat with pale faces, and Catherine was visibly anxious. Andrew spread the evidence of embezzlement on the table. These documents record the funds improperly withdrawn from Melissa's educational trust. They total. We were going to pay it back, her mother said weakly. When? Melissa asked quietly but forcefully. After taking away my dream, when were you planning to return it? If you consider your sister. Her father began. What about me? Melissa's voice rose slightly. I'm a person too. I have my own dreams and goals. Why did my future have to be sacrificed? Melissa has two options, Andrew said calmly. File criminal charges, or settle on the following conditions. He took out a document. It stipulated full restitution of the embezzled amount, a guarantee for Melissa's college and graduate school tuition, and funds for her new residence. This is too harsh. Her father frowned. It's not harsh, her grandfather said. Rather, it's too lenient. If Melissa files criminal charges, you could potentially go to prison. Silence dominated the room. Eventually, her parents and Catherine signed the settlement agreement. They admitted their wrongdoing and agreed to return all the money. Furthermore, Catherine would have to cover her medical school tuition with scholarships and loans from now on. From now on, you'll have to stand on your own feet, Catherine, Melissa told her sister. That's also an important life lesson. For the first time, Catherine looked at Melissa without arrogance. There was confusion and a hint of remorse in her expression. Melissa looked at her parents. I don't think you don't love me, but you misjudged my worth. From now on, I'm going to walk my own path. When leaving the house, Melissa didn't look back. As she got into the car with her grandfather, her heart was a mixture of sadness and a sense of liberation. The sign reading, Melissa Watson Psychological Counseling, gleamed in the spring sunshine. Cherry blossoms in full bloom swayed in the breeze in the park visible from the office window. Melissa saw off her last client of the day and returned to her desk with a deep sense of satisfaction. 2 years had passed since then. With her grandfather's support, she had returned to university and earned her master's degree in clinical psychology. Now she had opened her own counseling office, focusing particularly on supporting young people who had experienced trauma. Her own experiences had become a strength that allowed her to empathize with others' pain. May I knock? Grandfather Joseph's voice came from beyond the door. Since that day 2 years ago, her grandfather had moved nearby to watch over her new life. Grandpa, please come in. Her grandfather entered with a smile. Even his eyes were still vibrant. How were your patients today? Everyone's moving forward, little by little, Melissa replied happily. Especially a teenage girl named Jessica. She was able to put her feelings into words for the first time. You're doing wonderful work, her grandfather said proudly. Your grandmother would be pleased too. They spent weekends together, nurturing a true family bond. Melissa's life was filled with her own choices and passions. In her desk drawer, she kept letters that occasionally arrived from her parents. Having lost their reputation in the community, they had become distanced from many friends. Her father Edward had been dismissed from the insurance company and had to take a job with a lower salary. Her mother Elizabeth had fallen into depression from guilt and was receiving counseling. Catherine also contacted her occasionally. Still in medical school, she could no longer afford a luxurious lifestyle and was struggling with the burden of student loans, working part-time jobs to cover her tuition. In her recent letter, she wrote that she had started volunteering at a clinic in a poor area for the first time. Gradually, her character was beginning to change. "Have you forgiven them?" her grandfather asked one day, and Melissa answered while gazing out the window. "I haven't completely forgiven them yet, but I've stopped hating them. That was a choice I made for myself." She had overcome her past pain and was living a meaningful life with her new family, her grandfather, and the young people she supported. Occasionally, she kept in touch with Professor Morrison and sometimes gave lectures at the university. Outside the window, cherry petals danced in the wind. Melissa took a deep breath. She had ultimately learned that true family isn't just about blood ties, but about relationships where people respect and support each other. And she had built a new family with people who truly valued her. "Let's go home," her grandfather said gently. "I've made reservations at your favorite Italian restaurant today." Melissa smiled, stood up, and turned off the office lights. A new chapter in her life had just begun.